Beyond the storm. I never expected my life to take such a dramatic turn, but I guess that's how the best stories begin, right? With the unexpected. My name is Maya Thompson, and when I was 21, I thought I had it all figured out. I was a junior at the University of Michigan, majoring in environmental science with a minor in business. My plan was crystal clear: graduate with honors, land a job at a sustainability consulting firm, and change the world one green initiative at a time. Then I met Ethan. He was the star quarterback with a dazzling smile that could light up the entire stadium. When our eyes first met at that crowded campus coffee shop, I felt something I'd never experienced before, like the world shifted slightly on its axis. I was the serious student who spent weekends volunteering at the local conservation center, and he was the charming athlete who everyone wanted to be around. On paper, we shouldn't have made sense, but sometimes life doesn't care about what makes sense on paper. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. The place was packed with students cramming for midterms, laptops open, coffee cups stacked like miniature towers. I glanced up from my textbook, ready to politely decline. I had a major ecology exam the next day, but something in his genuine hazel eyes made me nod instead. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending his hand. His smile had a hint of shyness that contradicted his campus celebrity status. "Maya," I replied, accepting his handshake. "Aren't you the guy who threw that game-winning pass against Ohio State last weekend?" He laughed, running a hand through his sandy brown hair. "You actually watch football?" "My dad would disown me if I didn't," I said with a smile. Third-generation Wolverines fan. We talked until the baristas started stacking chairs around us. Our conversation flowed from football to climate change to our shared love of old sci-fi movies. By the time we left that coffee shop, something had begun, something I couldn't yet name but already felt deep in my bones. The next few months were like living in a dream. We studied together in quiet corners of the library, his knee brushing against mine. We went hiking in the fall, watching leaves paint the Michigan forests in shades of amber and crimson. He surprised me with picnics by the Huron River, and I dragged him to environmental protests, where he held signs with the same determination he showed on the football field. "You're changing me," he told me one night, as we lay on a blanket watching shooting stars streak across the night sky, "making me think about things beyond just the next game." I leaned into him, breathing in his familiar scent of pine and mint. "And you're teaching me that it's okay to live in the moment sometimes." His future seemed so bright. NFL scouts were showing up at games, and his coach talked about first-round draft picks. He had dreams of playing professional football, of course, but also of using that platform to advocate for environmental causes. "Imagine what we could accomplish together," he'd say, his eyes bright with possibilities. I believed him. I believed in us. Then came the spring of our senior year, when everything fell apart. It started with small changes, canceled dates, shorter phone calls, a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I told myself it was the pressure of his final season, the NFL combined, the scouts analyzing his every move. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. On a rainy April evening, he asked me to meet him at our favorite spot by the river. My heart knew before my head did. The way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, how his hands couldn't keep still. "Maya," he started, voice low and strained. "I've been offered an early draft position. It's happening faster than I thought." I smiled, though it felt fragile on my face. "That's amazing, Ethan. We knew this was coming. We can make it work long distance until I—" "That's not it," he cut in, finally meeting my gaze. The pain there was real, but so was the resolve. "It's not just any team. It's Dallas. My agent says I need to focus completely on my career right now. No distractions. The first few years are crucial for establishing myself, building my brand. Distractions." The word hung between us, sharp and cutting. "Is that what I am to you?" "You know that's not what I meant," he sighed, running a hand through his hair, The gesture I once found endearing now felt like a calculated move. This is my shot, Maya. Everything I've worked for. Dallas has specific expectations for their players, the kind of image they want us to project. And I don't fit that image. I finish for him, understanding washing over me like the cold drizzle that had begun to fall. It's complicated, he said, but we both knew it wasn't. Not really. He was choosing a carefully curated football career over what we had built. I think you should go, I said quietly, wrapping my arms around myself. Maya, please try to understand. I understand perfectly. I cut him off, blinking back tears. You've made your choice, Ethan. Good luck in Dallas. I walked away from him that day, the rain mixing with my tears. What hurt the most wasn't just losing him. It was realizing that our shared dreams had meant more to me than they had to him. That when pushed, he chose the easier path, the one with fewer complications. I threw myself into finishing my degree, graduating with honors as planned. Friends tried to set me up on dates. Family members gently suggested it was time to get back out there. But my heart wasn't in it. Instead, I accepted a position with a small environmental nonprofit in northern Michigan, working to protect the Great Lakes watersheds. It was meaningful work, exactly what I'd always wanted to do. But there was a hollowness inside me that I couldn't shake, a sense that something fundamental had been taken from me. At night, I catch glimpses of Ethan on sports channels, his smile polished for the cameras as he stood beside models at charity galas in Dallas. I was learning to live with the ache when my world shifted again. The nausea hit first, then the fatigue. I attributed it to stress and long hours until my colleague Emma, a retired nurse, gave me a knowing look over lunch one day. "When was your last period, honey?" she asked quietly. The pregnancy test confirmed what part of me already suspected. Sitting on the edge of my bathtub, staring at those 2 pink lines, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. I was pregnant with Ethan's child. My mind raced with questions and fears. Should I tell him? Would he even care? Would he think I was trying to trap him, to derail his carefully constructed new life? And most importantly, what did I want? I spent a week in a fog, going through the motions at work while internally battling with the biggest decision of my life. One evening, I found myself at the shore of Lake Michigan, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson. The vastness of the lake, the eternal rhythm of the waves, it grounded me, reminded me of what truly mattered. In that moment, with the wind in my hair and my hands resting on my still flat stomach, I made my decision. This child was a part of me, regardless of how Ethan might react. I would do this, with or without him. But he deserved to know. I called him that night, heart hammering as the phone rang. When he answered, his voice was guarded, formal. "Maya, is everything okay?" "Not exactly," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I need to tell you something important, and I'd rather do it in person." There was a long pause. "I'm in the middle of training camp. I can't just leave. It's not something I can say over the phone, Ethan." I took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed felt endless. Are you sure it's mine?" he finally asked, his voice strained. The question hit me like a physical blow. "Yes," I managed to say through clenched teeth. "I haven't been with anyone else." "I can't deal with this right now," he said, panic edging into his voice. "The season's about to start. My agent just lined up a major endorsement deal. This would ruin everything." "This is your child," I said, tears streaming down my face now. "Not some PR problem to manage. Look, I'll send money, okay? Whatever you need. But I can't be involved. Not now, maybe not ever." "I'm sorry, Maya." The line went dead, and with it, any lingering hope I'd had that the Ethan I fell in love with still existed somewhere beneath the football star exterior. I cried that night until I had no tears left. Then I got up the next morning, made breakfast, and went to work. Because that's what you do when your world falls apart. You keep moving forward, one step at a time. My parents lived just outside Detroit, a 4-hour drive from my small apartment near Traverse City. When I finally gathered the courage to tell them, I expected shock, disappointment, maybe even anger. What I didn't expect was my father's immediate embrace, tight and protective, or my mother's quiet understanding as she took my hand across the kitchen table. "You're our daughter," Dad said simply. "And that's our grandchild. Whatever you need, we're here." But I could see the worry in their eyes. They knew how hard this would be, a single mother working for a nonprofit, trying to build a career while raising a child alone. They offered to let me move back home, but I gently declined. I needed to do this on my own terms, to prove to myself, and eventually to my child, that we could create a beautiful life together, just the two of us. As my belly grew, so did my determination. I found a tiny 2-bedroom cottage to rent, its front porch facing the stunning blue expanse of Lake Michigan. I took on extra consulting projects, saving every penny for the baby's arrival. I joined a prenatal yoga class and made friends with other expectant mothers, creating a support network in my adopted hometown. The day Oliver came into the world was the hardest and most beautiful day of my life. 18 hours of labor, my mother holding one hand and Emma, who had become my closest friend, holding the other. When the doctor placed him on my chest, his perfect little face scrunched up in protest at this bright, loud new world, I felt a love so overwhelming it took my breath away. "Hello, Oliver," I whispered, tracing a finger along his downy dark hair. "I'm your mom, and we're going to be just fine." The first year was a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, and figuring out how to be everything Oliver needed. I'd rock him to sleep while watching the moonlight dance across the lake outside our window, telling him stories about the fish swimming in its depths, the birds soaring above it, the delicate ecosystem that made our home so special. When he was 6 months old, a letter arrived with a Dallas postmark. Inside was a check, a substantial one with a brief note for Oliver's expenses. No greeting, no questions about his son, just money, as if that could replace a father's presence. I wanted to tear it up, to send it back with a scathing letter of my own. But Oliver's future came first. I deposited the check into a college fund for him and sent a short email with a photo of Oliver, his hazel eyes, so like his father's, bright and curious. No response came. Every 3 months, another check would arrive, sometimes with a short note asking generic questions about Oliver's health or development. I always responded with photos and updates, keeping the door open for Ethan to be part of his son's life, even as my own heart hardened against the man who had abandoned us. Oliver grew into a spirited toddler, fascinated by the natural world around him. By 3, he could identify most of the birds that visited our backyard feeder. By 4, he was helping me plant native wildflowers to attract pollinators. On weekends, we'd explore the dunes and forests around Traverse City, his little hand in mine as he pointed out interesting rocks or unusual plants. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like Jackson?" he asked one evening after a play date with a friend from his preschool. The question I'd been dreading, yet knew was inevitable. I sat him on my lap, choosing my words carefully. "You do have a daddy, sweetie. He lives far away, and he's very busy with his job. Does he not love me?" The innocent question broke my heart. "Your daddy made some choices before you were born," I said, hugging him close. "But those choices aren't about you. You are perfect and wonderful and so very loved by me, by Grandma and Grandpa, by Aunt Emma and all our friends here." He seemed satisfied with that answer, for the time being. But I knew the questions would get harder as he grew older. Life settled into a rhythm. I was promoted to program director at the nonprofit, overseeing initiatives to reduce plastic pollution in the Great Lakes. Oliver started kindergarten, bringing home art projects featuring lake creatures and stories about saving the earth. I dated occasionally, a fellow environmental scientist, a kind-hearted local teacher, but nothing serious developed. My focus remained on Oliver and building our life together. Then came the phone call that shifted everything again. I was preparing dinner, Oliver setting the table with careful concentration, when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Dallas area code. Maya. It's me. Ethan. His voice, once so familiar, now seemed to belong to a stranger. I stepped onto the porch, away from Oliver's curious ears. What do you want, Ethan? My voice was steady, neutral. I've been injured, he said, the words coming out heavy and tired. Career ending. Torn ACL, complicated by nerve damage. The team doctors say I won't play again. I'm sorry to hear that, I said and meant it. Despite everything, I wouldn't wish that kind of loss on anyone. That's not why I'm calling, he continued. Being forced to stop, to actually think about my life for the first time in years, it's made me realize how many mistakes I've made. Oliver is 7 now, right? He'll be 6 next month, I corrected, a knot forming in my stomach. Why the sudden interest? There was a long pause. I want to meet him, Maya. I want to try to be a father to him. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 4 years, I'd waited for these words, had imagined them during late nights when Oliver had a fever or on the first day of school when he'd looked around for a father who wasn't there. But now that the moment had arrived, all I felt was fear. You can't just walk in and out of his life, Ethan. He's not a hobby you can pick up when you're bored or drop when something better comes along. I know that, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I know I don't deserve a chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. Not for my sake, but for his. I looked through the window at Oliver, carefully placing forks beside the plates, his tongue poking out in concentration, a gesture he'd inherited from me. I need time to think about this, I finally said. And if I agree, we do this slowly on Oliver's terms and mine. Thank you, Ethan said softly. That's more than I deserve. After we hung up, I sat on the porch steps, watching the waves roll in. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the water. Change was coming again, ready or not. The next few weeks were filled with careful conversations. First with my parents, who were skeptical but supportive of whatever I decided. Then with Emma, who reminded me that people can change, sometimes for the better. And finally, the hardest one with Oliver. Remember how I told you your daddy lives far away? I began one Saturday morning over pancakes. He nodded, syrup dripping from his fork. Because of his important job? Well, his job has changed, and he'd like to meet you. Would that be something you might want? Oliver's eyes, those hazel eyes so like Ethan's, widened. My real dad? Like in person? Yes, sweetheart. He might come visit us here. Will he like me? The vulnerability in his question made my chest ache. He will love you, I assured him, reaching across to wipe a spot of syrup from his cheek. Because you are the most amazing kid in the entire world. Ethan arrived on a crisp autumn day, the trees around our cottage ablaze with color. I watched from the porch as his rental car pulled into the gravel driveway. He looked different. Older, certainly, but also somehow softer around the edges. The polished athlete was gone, replaced by a man in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, moving with a noticeable limp. Oliver stood beside me, clutching my hand, suddenly shy after weeks of excited questions about his father. Hi, Ethan said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps, giving us space. His eyes were fixed on Oliver, drinking in every detail of the son he'd never met. You must be Oliver. Oliver nodded, pressing closer to my side. I've wanted to meet you for a very long time, Ethan continued, his voice gentle. Your mom sends me pictures, but they don't do you justice. You're much cooler in person. A small smile tugged at Oliver's lips. Mom says I'm the coolest kid in Michigan. Your mom is pretty smart, Ethan replied, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Always has been. That first visit was awkward, filled with careful conversations and tentative connections. We took walks along the lakeshore, Oliver gradually warming up enough to show Ethan his collection of interesting rocks and tell him about the endangered piping plovers that nested on the beaches. When Ethan left a few days later, promising to return soon, I found myself standing at the kitchen window, watching his car disappear down the road, with conflicted emotions swirling inside me. "He's nice," Oliver said, appearing at my side, "but different than I imagined. I smoothed his hair, always sticking up in the back, no matter how I combed it." "Different how?" He thought for a moment. "Sadder, like he lost something important." Out of the mouths of babes. Over the next year, Ethan became a regular presence in our lives. Monthly visits turned into twice monthly. Phone calls and video chats filled the gaps between. He rented a small house in Traverse City, just 15 minutes from our cottage, and started talking about making the move permanent. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to tire of small-town life or reveal this was all some midlife crisis response to his career ending. But something in him had genuinely changed. He started volunteering with my nonprofit, using his celebrity status, diminished but still valuable, to bring attention to Great Lakes conservation issues. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed following a day of hiking and swimming, Ethan and I sat on the porch, watching distant lightning play across the lake as a summer storm approached. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me another chance with Oliver. For raising him to be such an incredible kid. For—" he gestured vaguely at the lake, the cottage, the life I'd built. "All of this." I shrugged, uncomfortable with his gratitude. "I didn't do it for you." "I know. That's what makes it even more remarkable." He turned to face me, his expression earnest. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened between us, Maya. About the choices I made. Ancient history," I said, though we both knew it wasn't. "Not to me. I threw away the best thing in my life because I was chasing some idea of success that wasn't even mine. My agent, the team owners, the sponsors, I let them define what my life should look like. And for what? A few years in the spotlight, a bank account full of money I didn't even enjoy spending, an emptiness I tried to fill with everything except what actually mattered." The thunder rumbled closer, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. "What do you want me to say, Ethan? That I forgive you? That it's all okay now?" "No," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it. I just want you to know that I understand now what I threw away, and that the man sitting here isn't the same one who walked away from you 5 years ago." The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering on the porch roof. I stood up, needing space, needing air. "I should check on Oliver. He gets scared during storms." Ethan nodded, letting me retreat. But as I turned to go inside, he spoke again. "I'm not going anywhere this time, Maya. Not unless you tell me to." That night, as the storm raged outside, I lay awake listening to the thunder, thinking about second chances and whether people really could change at their core. Ethan had hurt me deeply, had left when things got complicated. Could I ever trust him again? Did I even want to? But watching him with Oliver, patient, attentive, genuinely interested in our son's thoughts and dreams, had begun to soften something in me that I thought was permanently hardened. Summer turned to fall, and Ethan remained steady in his commitment to Oliver. He coached Oliver's soccer team, helped with science projects, showed up for parent-teacher conferences. He became a fixture at our dinner table, at weekend adventures, at bedtime stories. And somewhere along the way, in the quiet moments between co-parenting discussions and Oliver's excited chatter, Ethan and I began to rediscover each other. Not as the college sweethearts we once were, but as the adults we'd become, shaped by our choices, our mistakes, our growth. It happened gradually, the shift between us. A lingering glance across the kitchen. A remembered joke from years before. The brush of his hand against mine as we both reached for Oliver's lunchbox. Small moments that began to build into something new. On Oliver's 7th birthday, we threw a party at the local nature center. Kids ran wild on the forest trails, participated in a scavenger hunt, made crafts from natural materials. Oliver was in his element, proudly showing his friends the ospreys nesting on a platform over the lake. As the party wound down, I found myself standing with Ethan, watching Oliver excitedly open his gifts. "We did good," Ethan said quietly. "He's amazing, Maya." "Yes, he is," I agreed, feeling a swell of pride. "No, I mean it," Ethan continued, turning to face me. "After everything, after all my mistakes, we still managed to create something perfect." "You managed to create something perfect?" I looked at him then, really looked at him. Gone was the polished veneer, the calculated charm. In its place was something real, a man who had lost his way and fought to find it again, who had learned what truly mattered the hard way. "It hasn't been easy," I said softly. "The best things never are." He hesitated, then added, "Like falling in love with you again. Harder this time, deeper, because I know exactly what I'm feeling and why." My heart stuttered. "Ethan, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I know I have no right to expect anything from you. I just needed you to know that for me, it's only ever been you. Even when I was too blind and stupid to realize it." Before I could respond, Oliver came running up, clutching a new field guide to Great Lakes wildlife. "Mom, Dad, can we go to the beach tomorrow to look for these birds?" "Please, Dad." He'd started using that word recently, testing it out cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence. Every time he said it, I watched Ethan's face light up with a joy that couldn't be faked. "If your mom's okay with it, buddy, I'm in," Ethan replied, ruffling Oliver's hair. "Sure," I said, smiling at my son's enthusiasm. "We can pack a picnic." As Oliver ran off to tell his friends, Ethan's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. I didn't pull away. That night, after tucking an exhausted Oliver into bed, we sat on the porch swing, the creaking of its chains a rhythmic backdrop to the symphony of night creatures. The moon cast a silver path across the lake, stretching toward infinity. "I used to dream about this," I admitted, breaking the comfortable silence between us. "In those early days with Oliver, when everything felt so overwhelming. I'd imagine you here, on this porch, the three of us together. It was a fantasy I used to get through the hardest nights." "And now?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet, hopeful. I turned to look at him, this man who had broken my heart and was now, improbably, helping to heal it. "Now I'm thinking that maybe some dreams don't have to stay dreams." I took a deep breath. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy. We have a lot of history, a lot of hurt to work through." "I know," he said, squeezing my hand. "And I'm willing to do that work, Maya. For as long as it takes." I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "One day at a time." "One day at a time," he echoed. In that moment, with the lake stretching before us and our son sleeping peacefully inside, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years: hope. Not just for Oliver, not just for the future we could build for him, but for us. For the possibility that sometimes the hardest journeys lead exactly where you're meant to be. Life isn't a straight path from dream to reality. It's messy and complicated, full of detours and unexpected turns. My journey had taken me from heartbreak to single motherhood to this moment, finding my way back to love, but on my terms, with my eyes wide open. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but sitting there under the vast Michigan sky, I knew one thing for certain: whatever storms came our way, we would weather them together. And that was enough, more than enough, to build a future on. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Oliver's laughter drifting up from downstairs, mingled with Ethan's deeper chuckle. The smell of pancakes filled the cottage. Outside my window, the lake stretched blue and endless, catching the early sunlight like scattered diamonds. I smiled, my heart full. The journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And this time, we were all facing in the same direction, moving forward together. One day at a time,